Hello. So last time I made a video demonstration on how to use SICM with predefined policies to investigate the results of your scan based on the CWE they are reported. So I had a question from Hal, and he says that basically that's fine, but what if he planned to create its own policy to identify what are the project or the defect that reported some type of flows, and in that case it was injection flows, and as well as making another type of search, which is for defect with a certain level of security severity in the vulnerabilities. So I'm gonna demo that capability that is of course part of SICM, because it's really the purpose of SICM is to make a platform for the security auditor to identify what are the flows inside the findings reported by the scanning tools, and based on that maybe to pay much more attention on some specific flows as they are created by the developers in the code. So for that purpose I will use the Tomcat version 8 project, because it features a couple of scans for different kind of scanners. There is some for covariates, sonar, BDBA and HUB, so there are some static analysis findings, and there is also software composition analysis findings. So the first thing that probably an auditor will do is to look at the bar of severity for each of the findings, for all the findings of each of the scans, and then also for the reported CVE and CWE. You know, each findings can be attached to CVEs and CWEs. For example, the static analysis finding could be associated with a couple of CWE, and a binary analysis can have CVEs, but as it can also have CWE, because sometimes CVE themselves mention CWEs. So that's what we can see, is that we do have a couple of CWE in that applications reported, and we go straight to the finding browser embedded in, provided by SICM. So the browser provides you with features for looking at all the findings reported by the scanner, and for each of them there's also things about the CWE for those defects. So if you don't select anything, it will list all the distinct CWE for all the findings reported in top level table on the top. And you can narrow the content of that table by clicking on the scan you are specifically focusing your analysis. So what we are going to do with that browser is try to identify what are the type of CWE reported, where they are reported, and then after that maybe doing a little bit more investigation using the dashboards. So what was interesting for R was about, let's see, what's about injections. So the first thing we can do, for example, is to look for the word injection in the findings. And doing this, it will really look to the word injection in anything the findings can report. It could be on the name, could be on the description of the checker, anything. So there are chances that for that specific word we will find, yes, some injections type of CWE. So that's quite interesting if you don't know exactly what is the number of the CWE for that type of flow. But if you do not know that, you can still say, for example, like pickup 1, the CWE 91, which is an XML injection. And what I'm going to do is to close all those tabs, and I'm going to look at CWE 91. So 91 is indeed XML injection, and is a child of 74, okay, and is itself a child of improper neutralization 707. So maybe that's the one that I am most interested in. Oh, I do have also a lot of things there. So I would say, well, what I'm really interested in is not about XML injection, you know, but I'm interested into any kind of injection that comes from neutralization, for example. Okay, so that's CWE 707. So if I put that code here, what is going to do SICM is to look across all the findings for CWE that match that one. Okay, so I can see that I have a couple of them. Okay, so it doesn't change anything for the scope here. If I want to change for the scope on the top and say, well, they're not interested really about the CWE themselves, but the findings that have that kind of problem. So here we are. We do have 328 matches, which means basically anything in the Tomcat that is matching that problem. And if I'm going to coverage, there is 252 and reported by Sonar 75. What about Hub? He says there's only one. And what about BDBA? No one. Okay, so that is quite interesting. So what I'm going to do right now is to look at another way to find out this kind of thing. This is by looking for specific problem using the dashboard. So what I'm going to do here is to create a new dashboard for making my analysis, and for that dashboard I selected the Tomcat project, and the first thing I'm going to do is to look at all the findings reported, and maybe I'm going to split all these findings per scan to have an idea of which of the scanners did provide most of the findings. Okay, but really what I'm not interested in is it's not by the findings themselves, but the classification against the CWE standard. So this is provided by the issue views. So it's not quite the same. So what I'm going to do is to say, well, what I'm really interested in is all the CWE, and what I'm going to look at is by label, meaning that I want to see the name of the CWE reported. So these are the top, I can say that, top reported CWE in my product. Okay, so the most popular, I would say, most often reported CWE is the 746. Suspicious comments. It's probably because Sonar is in the game. Okay, so that's not very interesting, that one. So what I'm going to do is to say, well, what if I remove actually Sonar? Sonar is quite verbose. Okay, so I'm going to only keep coverage and Yola. Okay. That's better. I don't have all the noise from Sonar. But anyway, I don't want them. Maybe there is something interesting for Sonar as well. Okay, so these are the top reported CWE. But what I would like to see, for example, is that each of these CWE is attached to a parent, that is itself attached to a parent, etc., etc. So what are the most common parents CWE reported in my product? That would be quite interesting. So I'm gonna just duplicate that chart, put it below for the sake of clarity. I will change and will say, well, don't report the CWE itself, but the matched, the parent. So I call it the matched CWE. Okay, so that's the chart for exposing all the CWE that are counted by the most the most often occurring parents. So it means that, for example, the CWE 664, improper control of resource through its lifetime, is a very common problem that can be dispatched across several types of CWE, child CWE, across all the scans. So that is probably the most interesting thing in the analysis of the security posture of that application, because it tells me what these are the category of the most popular problem I found in my code. So if I want to see more of them, because here you have only, you have only how many? 17. Let's say let's grow up to 20, that one, and maybe enlarge a little bit. Okay, so all those CWE that are reported by the tools and the parents one sometimes falls into categories, and categories collect a couple of CWE because they are of the same type of problem. Sometimes categories are also some perspective in a standard. So this is what we're gonna look at. And for example, let's move below again. So these are not the top reported CWEs, the top parent. CWE in my product, and reported categories in my product. So I'm going to change the classification, and the classification will be about categories, and here we are. So you see some of those categories are related to the standards, some specific chapters, section of the standard, and some are related to some type of, let's say, type of flow you can have into your application. And again, I can enlarge, and say I want more than 25, maybe 35. Okay. So from here, I can say a little bit more about the susceptibility of my application to different classification of the weaknesses. And I see that, for example, 60, 64, and 703 are two kind of problem that occurs too many times in my application. And this is, as a security auditor, this is something I should have I should monitor in the lifetime of this application. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to look at all those charts all the time. There is each time there is a new update on the scans. What I'm going to do is to create a policy that will specifically look at this. So what I'm going to do is to create that policy, and I say creating my policy, and since that demonstration is for HAL, I will say policy for HAL. And from there, I will select the appropriate rule to catch the occurrences of the CWE I don't want to see, or at least I want to monitor specifically in my application. So for that purpose, I have a specific rule that will look for blacklisted CWE, avoid blacklisted CWE. Maybe that one. Maybe the new one is not the best one right now. So it's very simple. It works just by providing the list of the CWE you do want to catch with that rule. Sorry. So the one I don't want to see, I think it was 646. Was it that one? It was 664. Don't make that mistake. 664. And the name was, it's not filled automatically, of course, that would be too easy. It's about improper control of resource. Improper control of resource. And if that happens, then I will trigger a violation of severity high. Whatever the severity is of the CWE of the findings, it's the severity of the violation with respect to my goal in terms of compliance. So now what I can do is to go back to my project and to say, well, I'm going to attach my new policy for that project. And bam, I do have a violation. And what says that violation is that if I look at my Tomcat project, I have, with the misspelling, the improper control of resource flagged inside. You know, with all the CWE of each of the defect that were matched by this one. Okay, so you can do this for example, for the second one. There's two major one. The second one is 703. Okay, so you can say the easy way, you know, just add 703, for example, or you can say, well, this is a distinct one and I want distinct violation for that one. So I'll try to find out, avoid the blacklisted CWE. This is the old one. That one will be super critical, of course, and the number of that one will be 703. Was it 703? It was 703. Okay, so new rules in the policy, update my compliance, and I have my two violations. So when looking at the dashboard here, I can say, well, what I would like to do is to say, what are the violations for my product? So I need to put that one on the top and say, configure. I want to classify all the violation by, let's say, the label and severity. That's fine. So this is the new analysis of that project. First, I have a chart that presents me with all the findings on the severity, and what really matter in terms of security audit is the violation that were catched by this violation, by this by the rule, by scanning all the CWE reported. So next time I will have a report updated from the scan, it will or not trigger new violations, and this is really what I have to look at, is that violations. So I hope that that helps to explain how to do that, and that convinces you. Bye.